As many of you already know, I took a quick vacation to New Orleans to meet some close friends on the week of the November election last year. It had been our plan to celebrate Kamala's victory, but we would have never suspected that party we were planning would quickly turn into group therapy. I realize now that we shouldn't have been, but we were shocked. My friends announced that night that they were just not going to watch the news for the next 4 years. We're older now, and we can't really expect to live a long time if we are wallowing in rage and stress every day. And I understand why they felt that way. A part of me was very sympathetic. I don't want to fill every sermon that I write for the next few years to be a new every week version of just how horrible Donald Trump is. But I couldn't justify just turning my back on American politics and the circumstances under which especially vulnerable people are living. While I cannot carry a constant load of hair-on-fire rage, I resolved to fall back on the old British encouragement in the face of the German invasion during World War II. Keep calm and carry on. The worst president in American history won re-election, and this time he has a vendetta and he has a book of plans for dismantling democracy. So the stakes are too high for any of us to just stop caring. We just have to learn how to be concerned. We have to learn how to be involved without being consumed with anger or hatred, which may be, as Yoda said, the way to the dark side of the Force. Trump's first term in office was an international embarrassment. I was doing lecture tours every year at that time through Great Britain and found myself having to apologize for American ignorance at every stop. But this second term, this is much more dangerous. I don't want to breathlessly cry that the sky is falling, but let me just very factually tell you why I believe that Trump's presidency is currently turning our democracy into, literally, without any hyperbole at all, he is turning America into a fascist state. Please, anyone who can dispute anything that I am about to say, please reply, write to me, and tell me. And if I find that I've said anything that is not factually true today, I will retract my statements. First, Trump is making expansionist threats, even threatening to use American military might to annex Canada, Mexico, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. He is proposing to add vast tracts of land stolen from sovereign nations in exactly the same way that Putin is trying to annex Ukraine. And clearly, Putin has designs on restoring the boundaries of the old Soviet Union. With these threats, Trump sacrifices America's moral high ground in our opposition to Russia's expansionist wars, and it gives a green light to China to just go ahead and invade Taiwan. And I shudder to think about what North Korea is thinking about invading South Korea. There is no way to spin this that would make Trump look any less like Adolf Hitler or Putin. This is objectively a nightmare scenario that horrifies our allies. The second tell about Trump's fascism is the weaponization of the judicial system. Trump accused Democrats of doing this, but as in most cases, an accusation from Trump is almost always a confession. From the days that he chanted, "Lock her up," through his attempts to get President Zelensky to manufacture false evidence against Joe Biden in the Ukraine, Trump literally forecasts what he's going to do when he accuses anyone else of doing something wrong. You know that he pardoned all of the January 6 insurrectionists, some of whom were guilty of violent crimes against law enforcement, and he is even floating the idea of actually paying reparations to the criminals who were convicted and locked up, repaying them for having done millions of dollars of damage to the Capitol building. Trump is using the judicial system to deport people who have been denied due process, people who've never been convicted of a crime, paying millions of dollars to a dictator in El Salvador to brutally imprison people who may very well be entirely innocent of anything they've been accused of, gang involvement or anything else, and now threatening to deport American-born citizens in the same way, what he calls homegrown criminals. This is not legal in America, but this is what fascists do. He is further using the judiciary to punish those who have investigated his crimes from his first administration. Whenever anyone tries to hold Trump accountable for crime of which he is clearly guilty, he accuses them of treason because to be critical of a dictator or a cult leader is somehow treasonous or blasphemous. Thirdly, I will point out that Trump is filling the government with loyalists who are distinctly unqualified for the positions they are filling. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but let me just mention Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. He had no relevant experience or qualifications for this job. He also comes with a long history of alcohol abuse and sexual assault. He has demonstrated fiscal irresponsibility in previous management of two small charities, and he created an international crisis by revealing military attacks in an unsecure format on his personal phone when he was sharing battle plans with a journalist. And even after weeks of controversy around that, he did it again on the same public format and included his wife and his brother in the text chat about attack plans, almost certainly tipping our hand to the target of these attacks, putting American airmen in grave danger. Now, he may be removed by the time we post this video, but this is the guy that Trump picked for this important job, managing the largest institution in the world. And it is important to remember that he was also approved by virtually all of the Republicans in the Senate. Everyone knew how incompetent and dangerous Hegseth is, and yet they voted for him. These same senators approved of Robert Kennedy's appointment to chair the $1.6 trillion a year Department of Health and Human Services, even though he does not have a single day of medical training or experience, and he has made himself wealthy by exploiting horribly gullible people, scaring them away from vaccines, fluoride, and promoting entirely misleading and ignorantly false things about autism, measles, and other health conditions. Kennedy claims to have treated his own learning disorder by being an intravenous heroin user for more than a decade. His own family has testified to the fact that he should not be believed, that he should not be trusted. But this roadkill-eating conspiracy theorist is currently dismantling our medical sciences research into future treatments of cancer and other serious illnesses, putting us all in grave danger. Also, there is this Linda McMahon, a former pro wrestling promoter, and now Trump's appointment as Secretary of Education, who is tasked with shutting down the Department of Education. In a recent speech, she really showed her hand. Her speechwriters had set her up to publicly praise the addition of AI into public schools, which is something she obviously knew nothing about. When she came to that part of her speech, she said that A1, that delightfully tangy and sweet sauce that many of us enjoy at our steaks is being included in public education. After all of the pontificating the Trump team has done about DEI, they have made themselves into a case study for why DEI regulations were always needed. Rather than hiring qualified people for these important jobs, he is, and I cannot say this delicately, he is choosing very stupid white people whose only qualification is their loyalty to their fascist dictator. Take, for example, Trump's press secretary, the 27-year-old election denier, Carolyn Leavitt. Leavitt's married to a wealthy real estate magnate who's more than twice her age. Leavitt daily displays either a tragic degree of being uneducated or entirely uninformed, or what may be more likely is she displays a penchant for telling outrageous lies with a straight face as if she didn't know any better. I could point to her infamous exchange about who actually pays for tariffs, in which she insisted that tariffs are a tax cut for Americans, which means she either doesn't know what a tariff is or she thinks that Americans are dumb enough to not know that Trump's tariffs represent the single largest peacetime tax increase on middle Americans in American history. She also spews misinformation about DOGE with such claims as America is currently spending $200 million for sex changes in Guatemala and dozens of other claimed DOGE cuts, which are pure fabrications, out of thin air, totally fake lies. Compare her to Biden's press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who was born in France to Haitian parents. She's black, she's a lesbian, and as such, she checks the boxes of what Trump rails about in his DEI rants. She's an immigrant. Her family is from a country that Trump called a shithole country. She's a lesbian and she's black, but she has twice as much education as Leavitt and much more relevant work experience, and you cannot pin a single incident of her ever sharing misinformation in the press room. So who's the DEI appointment? Leavitt got the job because she's a white sycophant. Karine Jean-Pierre got the job because she was eminently qualified. And she's not the one, if I can be ugly and say it, Jean-Pierre is not the one of the two who had gender-affirming surgery, which, though it may be news to Leavitt, her nose job that reduced the size of her nose by at least 50% was exactly that. But I don't want to be petty. And a fourth reason why Trump is trying to turn America into a fascist dictatorship can be seen in his efforts to control the media and institutions of higher learning. Trump actually sued CBS for $20 billion because he did not like the way that 60 Minutes edited an interview with Kamala Harris before the election. $20 billion sounds like a figure out of an Austin Powers movie, but it made CBS start to put so much pressure on the producer of 60 Minutes that Bill Owens has recently resigned from that position, giving up on the future of journalism. Trump is cutting funding to NPR and PBS because he doesn't like the way they report the news. He's trying to take down the Voice of America and has threatened to pull the broadcast licenses of MSNBC and CNN because I don't think he understands broadcast and cable news. But he is restricting access to daily White House briefings to news agencies that give only favorable coverage to Trump. Similarly, he's even taken over the Kennedy Performing Arts Center so that even artistic performances which portray Trump unfavorably or even perform works that he doesn't like or he doesn't understand, that these acts can no longer be booked at the Kennedy Center. He has famously attacked Ivy League colleges, insisting that they cease all DEI programs and that he's even tried to restrict what they can teach and who they can hire to teach. Harvard has courageously stood up to the Trump administration, even though there are billions of dollars of research grants at stake. By the way, this is for free. If you didn't know it, Harvard has the second largest foundation in the world, second only to the Vatican. When I was there were always students protesting in Harvard Yard, demanding that Harvard go tuition free, which seemed like wishful thinking to me, until one of my professors told us that Harvard could stop charging tuition and continue to operate in the same way for 400 years based on their current foundation holdings. So maybe threatening Harvard with withholding money is not likely to be an effective tactic. Still, these moves reek of fascist intent to control the news, to control education and the arts, and any form of communication which might educate or inform the public so that voters can better understand what he is doing to them. A fifth tell that Trump is a dictator with fascist goals is in the way he is using the White House to enrich himself and his largest donors. He shamelessly sells watches, trading cards, gold sneakers, Bibles, fake cryptocurrency, as well as his famous hats and stock in his social media platforms, all of which has earned him potentially billions of dollars in the same way that corrupt politicians in dictatorships use their office to make themselves fabulously wealthy. And that's without even delving into how he travels exclusively to his own properties, to golf and to vacation, forcing the government to pay inflated prices for accommodating his security detail and government entourage in his overpriced hotels. And this image that I just showed you bleeds into my sixth issue. This Trump 2028 hat teases the fact that Trump does not intend to leave office when his second term is over. This is not a joke. In spite of the constitutional limit of 2 4-year terms, Trump is already talking about a third term. And I don't know if that means he plans to just ignore the Constitution and run for re-election, or if he plans more nefariously to do away with elections and just stay in office. Either option is dangerously crazy. But have you noticed the silence of Republican elected officials on this point? Even though he's been quite public about his intentions, no Republican elected officials seem to be speaking out against it. In spite of Trump's low approval ratings and his disastrous destruction of what was the strongest economy in the world, he continues to insist that he is somehow America's savior, and he literally wants to have his image carved into Mount Rushmore. Folks, that is 6 undeniable issues. 6 points which I believe no honest person can look at and deny that Trump is well on his way to disassembling our constitutional democracy and replacing it with a fascist dictatorship in his own image. There is more that can be said on this issue, but let me move on to a couple of related important observations. The first is that the Republican Party has demonstrated that they lack the moral conscience and the strength of character to stand up to Trump, with only a handful of exceptions who have been largely drummed out of the party for failing to fall in line behind this inept and ignorant tyrant. And what pains me even more to say is that the Democratic Party has given us no reason to believe that they have either the courage or the intellect that would be necessary to stand up to Trump. Trump should have been put on trial in 2021 for insurrection, for election interference, for stealing classified documents, and for emoluments. But while the Democrats did hold hearings, and did a lot of public hand-wringing, they were evidently afraid to actually enforce the laws, to defend the Constitution, and put Trump in prison for the rest of his life. They slow-walked all of his legal issues, allowing him to run for and win re-election. Sadly, no one in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party will be able to lead the cavalry over the hill to come and rescue America. Our salvation will have to come from somewhere else. I believe that our only hope lies in an awakened, informed, and inspired population that can unite to save democracy, even if it requires a revolution to do so. People that I love and respect have repeatedly said that we must be careful in how we talk to Trump voters. We cannot talk down to them, they tell me. We cannot tell them that they are stupid, lest we alienate them and make them double down on their support for Trump. And I just can't agree with that anymore. Voting for Trump the first time should have been obviously stupid. Voting for him a second time was even more stupid after you had seen how he behaved in office. Voting for him a third time was not just more stupid, but it was a decision to choose to be stupid, which is much worse than just being inherently ignorant. I can't pull punches here. Americans have to wake up and own the ignorant mistake they made in voting 1, 2, or 3 times for a man who is trying to destroy the world order that has made the Western world both wealthy and secure. In November of 2024, what did voters know about Donald Trump when they went into their polling place? This is going to take a couple of minutes, but this is what voters knew about Trump in November of 2024, and most of them voted for him anyway. They knew that Trump had incited a violent insurrection against the American government in an attempt to overthrow a free and fair election. They knew that Trump had horribly mismanaged the pandemic so that more than 1 million Americans died of COVID, most of whom would not have died if Trump had not been such an anti-science moron. He actually suggested on live TV that we inject bleach into our bodies to kill the COVID virus. You heard him. They knew that Trump called neo-Nazi demonstrators very fine people. They knew that Trump separated thousands of children from their parents at the border, holding them in what appeared to be dog pens, and in many instances actually lost records in government bureaucracy so that they were never reunited with their families. They knew that he had police use tear gas on peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square so that he could be photographed holding a Bible upside down in front of a church. They knew that Trump had tried to ban all Muslims from entering this country, even though he made his first presidential visit to Saudi Arabia, where he and his family hoped to get billions of dollars in bribes, which they secured. In November of 2024, voters knew that Trump had been impeached twice and that he was only saved by a majority of spineless Republicans in the Senate, even though he was obviously guilty of all charges. They knew that he had the worst jobs record of any American president throughout history. They knew that he had withheld arms shipments from the Ukraine, trying to force them to fabricate false legal charges against Joe Biden. They knew that he had fired the FBI director just because he had investigated Trump's ties to Putin, which were clearly illegal and against American interests. He diverted military funds to pay for his southern border wall, which he had promised he would make Mexico pay for. And by the way, Mexico didn't pay a dime towards the construction of that wall. He objectively lied more than 30,000 documented times while in office. He also banned transgender people from serving in the military. He lied about releasing his tax returns, which no one has yet seen. He hired unqualified family members to work in the White House, the way that dictators and fascists do. He called veterans who gave their lives in war for our country, he called them losers and suckers and refused to visit their graves. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. He pulled out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, and he undermined NATO at every turn. He insulted our trading partners and allies while talking about being in love with dictators and fascists. Voters saw how he forced his cabinet members to praise him on camera, the way that dictators and cult leaders do. He actually said in public that he deserved to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, though no one can think of any reason why he would have been. He called his absurdly loyal vice president a pussy for following the Constitution, and he applauded the calls to have him hanged on the Capitol lawn. Voters knew that Trump made his press secretary lie for him for everything from the size of his inauguration audience to how much he weighs in his annual physicals. He even is broadly known to cheat at golf. Voters saw how he just drew lines on a map with a Sharpie to support his own stupid claims about a hurricane's path. He didn't even have the class to attend his successor's inauguration. He apparently sold pardons as he was leaving office after his first term through his minion, Rudy Giuliani. I could go on, but out of respect for your time and the objective reality that I've already gone on too long, it must be said that there is no plausible excuse for the ignorance demonstrated in the re-election of Donald Trump. But to continue to support him is to choose to be stupid. And I cannot beg you strongly enough to gather your self-respect about you and acknowledge not only that you were horribly wrong, but you must absolutely, verbally, vocally, loudly, publicly change course. As Soren Kierkegaard famously said, there are two ways that you can be wrong. One is to believe what is false, but the second is to refuse to believe what is true. What I have told you today is objectively true. And if you're trying to dismiss any one of these points because you don't like them or because it's inconvenient, you are choosing to be stupid. In my first year of teaching at Drury University, I was teaching a course on the historical Jesus. I was nervous about it and worried, both for my students and for myself. And the former chair of the Philosophy and Religion department slipped in one day near the end of the first semester to just watch a class. And at the end of that class, we had a long private conversation in which I shared with him my anxiety about one student in particular who had turned in a midterm paper that was just word salad. He obviously had not done the reading assignments, he had not attended very many classes, and his paper was an obvious F paper. But I asked Dr. Killow, what can I do? I can't give this kid an F. And he said to me, you have no right to take away from a student what they have earned. And if they have earned an F, it's not your choice to give them a passing grade. You must give them what they earned. And I did. But when it comes to this past election, you're going to have to own what you've done. You can't ask us to not talk down to you or tell you that you were stupid when you chose to be stupid, when you knew better, and you put the lives of everyone in the world at risk to put this joke back into the White House. No one can rationally deny the hard swing towards fascism currently underway in the United States. And even though I'm ashamed to admit I actually have very little hope for America's future, still, we are the best hope that most of the people in the world have. And so, without caving into cynicism about America's lack of intelligence, I implore you to unite for democracy. And please, in the process, keep calm and carry on.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.